Hey, good morning, everyone. Kyle Nelson from the Colorado Vost here. I'm the training coordinator for the team. Welcome, everyone, to the May 2018 edition for the Colorado Virtual Operations Support Team. Really excited to be sharing with you all today on creating custom and collaborative Google Maps. And one thing I do want to say right off the bat is welcome to all of our friends from Cascadia Vost. I know a lot of you are on the audio chat as well as viewing the live stream here this morning. So good morning to you all. Of course, my fellow Colorado Vost members as well. So this is a really exciting training here. We love getting other teams involved and sharing the love and sharing the knowledge and things. So thank you all for joining us this morning. It's a true pleasure to have you all on here. And if it sounds like there's a bit of an echo going on, you're dialed in both on the phone and on the computer. I am actually, the audio is going through both, the Google Hangouts on YouTube as well as through the phone. So I got to monitor both here this morning. So a little bit of an interesting situation, but we'll go ahead and get that addressed as we go on through this. Another thing that I'd like to hit right off the bat is unfortunately, Hannah Hayrick, unfortunately could not be with us this morning. She couldn't join us for this presentation. Unfortunately, she got called away to a real world situation this morning. So of course we have to respect that. That's the nature of the work that we do. So hopefully look forward to seeing Hannah for future training, but fear not. Hannah and I actually presented on this content at the Government Social Media Conference just about a month ago, give or take, down in Denver. So this is kind of mirrors that a little bit, but then also we'll jump into the Vost specific kind of piece of it with the collaborative and creating those custom Google Maps on the fly. So to give folks kind of an overview of what we're planning for today is we're going to go ahead and just got a quick couple intro announcements here to hit on first thing this morning, as well as then after that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the main part of the program. We're going to step through a couple of slides, and we're actually going to do some exploring as to why we use Google Maps, how it's, what the benefits of the platform is, why and how it's been used before for emerging incidents of a very both local scale and a large scale events. And then finally, we'll jump into the hands-on portion here to round out our training this morning. And that will take us through the getting into things. We'll go live here. So I'll be demoing it here on my screen and narrating that as I go along and through that. And so you can go ahead and please feel free to follow along. For my Colorado Vost members, please be sure to indicate if you're attending today's call either live, viewing that live, or viewing the recording in the workbook that is linked both in our Slack training channel as well as in the email announcement that you received this morning. So please go ahead and log your time in there. Again, can't state how important that is to get credit for that. And Cascadia Vost folks, please log your training time as is appropriate per your protocol. I'm not privy to that. I wouldn't claim to be. So if you have questions on that, I'm sure Alicia or Eli could answer any questions you may have. For those of you that are viewing the recording on YouTube, I am watching the chat feature on there this morning, and I'll be able to see your messages there. And of course, if you're on the audio call, I am listening to that here live. So feel free to jump in and interrupt me with questions at any time as we go on through. And of course, if you have something to share, to add, to contribute, that's the beauty of these trainings. We like to be able to share our members' experiences, so feel free to jump in there as well. So that's a little bit of the administrivia type things. I'm going to go ahead and flip over to our agenda for this morning. That's going to guide our discussion for just a couple of minutes here, and then we'll jump over to the main feature presentation. So stand by one. Okay, so now we're looking at our agenda here. We're right on time with our main program. And just a reminder, we're still meeting the third Friday of select months at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. You can view those selected months in our training planner. For those of you that are in our training agenda, you can go ahead and look at that, some of the topics that we have slated for you coming up. Of course, if anyone is interested in helping to fill out that training calendar, I'd really love to share from our members' experiences. And this isn't just for my Colorado friends, this is also for my Cascadia VOST friends. Please do feel free to share and contribute this morning, as well as if you'd like to add a little bit to the program that we have here in Colorado to share your expertise or your knowledge on a particular platform or a service, or you'd like to share a case study with us on how your VOST has performed for a recent event. That's something that we'd love to hear about, and we'd love to be able to share with our members. So please feel free to reach out to me. All my info, I know Eli and Alicia both have that. And of course, that will also be linked in any correspondence that I have with you all moving forward. Mickey is not on the call this morning. She's away on things, I believe, with the state. I know they're pretty active right now with some training and exercises that are going on. So always fun. So if she does have anything, she'll be sure to pass that along to all of our members in Colorado as well. Our next meeting on Friday, July 20th, 2018, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. We're looking to have another session on Reddit Advanced Searching and Monitoring, and that's going to build on the Reddit searching session that Alicia delivered for us for the Colorado VOST last year. And so we're going to hopefully move forward with that topic as well. So stay tuned for updates there. But without any further ado, we're going to jump in. Again, there's a quick overview, but we'll go ahead and get into this. And one disclaimer I always throw out at the beginning of our trainings is that with real-time trainings, and because there will be a live demo at the end with the hands-on Google mapping, that is always something that in the live demonstration space on the internet, Google Maps is a pretty safe platform, but of course, any other things that may show up on the screen, I'll do my best to keep them politically correct and G-rated, if you will. And I don't think we'll have a problem with that today, but always would love to throw out that disclaimer going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and break from our agenda now. I'm going to over, so you're going to see me again for a little bit here, and transition over to our presentation platform. So I'm going to go ahead, share my screen, and away we go. All right, so here's our presentation. This is modified. If any of you saw this at GSMCon, it follows a similar format. Of course, have to give a shout out to Hannah, who helped with delivering and developing this content as well. Please go ahead, give her a follow on Twitter, if you would, Hannah_Hayrick. Probably, so please, yeah, feel free to go ahead, give her a follow. Build up her Twitter presence. I know it's still growing, so she'd love to get a follow from you. Myself, of course, I'll do my intro in just a quick second for those that are visiting from the Pacific Northwest on our training this morning. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention both Alicia and Eli, who actually created this content originally. And so a big shout out, big thanks to them for allowing me to present that this morning on their behalf. And so a lot of the examples and things many of you may recognize as events that they have helped with or have worked with previously. So just a little bit about me. My name, of course, is Kyle Nelson. I work in both the public and private sector side of digital media. With respect to the public sector side, I'm a social media instructor for the National Disaster Preparedness Training Center, as well as the training coordinator for the Colorado Virtual Operations Support Team. And that's how I operate on the public side, largely on the monitoring and information gathering side, but increasingly getting into more of the digital engagement realm. On the private sector side, I'm a consultant and instructor with Epicenter Media and Training. We're based out of Rochester, New York, where we focus on technology, training, and exercises. And I also work with their deployment support unit as a digital media specialist, working both on-site and remotely in support of both emerging incidents and pre-planned events. So that's a quick bio on me. You can dig in a little bit more if you want. Follow me at WX Kyle Nelson. My LinkedIn profile is linked there, and you can take a deep dive if you're feeling like that. But otherwise, we're going to go ahead and just explore a little bit. And I always like to kind of throw that out, like, why are you here, right? Why are you spending about an hour or so of your glorious Friday? It's a bluebird day here in Colorado, but why are you spending an hour of your glorious Friday learning about Google mapping and all that? I mean, it could be it's something to do with your job and you want to learn how to do that more effectively for your professional role. Maybe you have a personal interest in this. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Perhaps growing your skills, and perhaps it's a capability that you'd like to add to your vast repertoire, if you will. But just different things to think about and kind of keep that in mind. And I want folks to get out of this training what you want. So again, as we're going through, please feel free, drop a question or message in the chat window with the Google Hangout, or those of you that are on the call this morning, by all means, please jump in there and contribute as well. I'm super excited to hear from all of you. I know you all were doing your intros on the phone call as I came into the hat this morning, and it was really awesome to hear just the wide variety of folks that we have in attendance this morning. So thank you again all for joining us. Let's jump into the main part of our presentation. So why Google Maps, right? That's the question that some of you may be asking or wondering, is why have we selected this particular platform? There's any number of reasons for it, but the main ones here are that Google Maps it's publicly accessible. It's accessible worldwide, and it's a symbol, it's an icon, it's if you just jump on the internet, many places are using Google Maps as their backbone for day-to-day interaction with guests and clients. And we may also be using that whether we realize it or not on a day-to-day basis. I'm a big Google Maps fan myself. I use it almost exclusively when I travel and teach and do things nationwide. But I also really like how it integrates and with the Waze platform as well. So all that data, that information being shared. And so if you ever heard Google come up as you're in there, like, hey, we found a faster route. Well, that's because Google's constantly doing and updating in the real time in the background, and perhaps through a user report on Waze, there's an accident ahead. Well, here, this detour route would actually be faster. So it's an interface that people recognize. It's as you see on the screen, you instantly like, oh yeah, that's Google. Even if I didn't have the icon there, you would instantly know that's what that platform is. And it supports what we call a multimodal transportation and navigation. And that is, it's not just driving, right? It's not just driving from point A to point B, because those of us that live in more urban or suburban environments, we know that driving a vehicle, like let's say we're down in the Denver area, it's sometimes a real pain, right? It's not fun. Those my friends in the Pacific Northwest know this as well. Seattle area traffic can be absolutely horrible sometimes. And again, maybe an understatement, but I digress. And so what Google Maps allows you to do is pick how you want to get from your destination, from where you are to where you want to go, whether that's by car, by rail, walking. There's even the cycling option in there. I know many cities becoming increasingly bike friendly, and of course, ride sharing. They're starting to integrate that even more with the ride sharing applications right into the default Google Maps interface. So not even needing to open up another app, but having that transportation information, 5 different modes right there in the same app. And that also plays into our community, because members of our community may not always have access to a vehicle or to public transportation. So we want to use a system like Google Maps that gives them the ability to choose the best mode of transportation for them at that particular time for that particular situation. Continuing along that vein, Google Maps also helps us to connect with members and share information with members of our community where English is not their first language. And I know in the state of Washington, I believe there is a, hey Mickey, just popping in there. There is, of course, a new law, I believe, I think it's state law in Washington, that communications must be, and don't quote me on this, and someone jump in here if you know. I believe it's communications from any official agency at the state or local level must be accessible by individuals where English is not their primary language. So I believe that's the new thing up there, and I'm waiting for this to take off nationwide. I think that's a great thing. And the beauty of Google is that Google has a translate app. It has that built into its Google service and product suite, so that if I'm creating a map and putting this in and all the descriptions of things in English, if a user views that and in their Google account, their language is set to something other than English, that translation will occur automatically. And that's, I think, an incredibly powerful tool, and it's a huge time saver for those of us that are tasked with helping to communicate very, critical information in a crisis situation or even during a pre-planned event. And we need to get that information to all of our population, our greater community, and being able to do that effectively. It works in the palm of your hand. Most people probably have the Google Maps app installed on their phone. And this is kind of very much in contrast to any GIS or Geographic Information System application. If any of you have worked with things like ArcGIS or other very robust commercial GIS platforms, you can create beautiful displays, very neat, very, very detailed, but are they really mobile friendly? If you ever linked, say, an ArcGIS map on your web page or a blog and tried to access it on your phone, it's very hard to work with and manipulate. Where Google Maps is designed to be mobile friendly because that's the platform that most people access Google Maps on. And finally, it's collaborative. So if we have multiple agencies or individuals involved, like we have an activation for our VOST, and we are asked to come in and say, hey, we need you to help create a map of, say, shelters, evacuation routes, whatever it may be. It's not just a single person or an agency that can be working on that. It can be collaborative. So you can, just like we can have multiple VOST members putting information into our VOST workbook as we find these search results for things that we're monitoring for. We can all be contributing simultaneously. At the same time, we can also be editing in the Google Maps interface simultaneously, adding information, updating things. And because, of course, any event or incident is constantly evolving. And we, of course, recognize that. And Google Maps allows us to update things on the fly. And those updates are then pushed out and updated automatically as the other users are viewing that information in real time. So no need to hit refresh or, hey, we need you to push out a big update. It's constantly being updated within the Google Maps interface. So those are a couple things on why Google Maps is really the preferred platform here that we're going to work with. And of course, it all revolves around, it comes back to my favorite four-letter F word, free, right? I don't know what you all are thinking, but free, that's what we're looking at, and that's what we're focused on here as well, because with any government agencies or us as individuals or as a VOST, we may not always have the funding that's required or the all of the very, very intense scrutiny that's being placed on purchasing things, nor will we always have the training and the knowledge to operate these big complex GIS tools. So having a platform that we're familiar with, it's an intuitive interface, and it doesn't take much training or much spin up to be able to do this very, very effectively. So those are a couple of things that are really, really neat about Google Maps. Let's look at a couple of examples of how it's been used in the past. The first case study that we present here is one that some folks may be very familiar with, and that is the Seattle Aurora bridge crash. So let me paint the picture and kind of put the scenario in play for my friends and my teammates on the on the podcast. Wow, on the training this morning who are not familiar with this event. This occurred on a truss bridge over a major waterway in Seattle. You had an amphibious vehicle, the Duck. If any of you have ever ridden on those, they're actually vehicles that used to be used by the military. and they actually can both drive on land as well as enter the water and navigate in that environment as well. And that was full of tourists who were in the Seattle area. It's a very common tourist attraction, and one where you have people from all over the globe that have come and are using on the dock to explore the city. That collided with a tour bus full of international students. Now, if this sounds like an ICS 300 or 400 scenario to anyone, don't worry. You're waiting for the next shoe to drop, right? There's all these things that could cascade from here, but just this scenario alone and how we've described it up to this point, there are individuals from, I believe it's 30, I think it was over 30 different nationalities that were involved in this. So tourists, people that are not familiar with the city, with the resources that are available, now they may be injured, quite possibly, and trying to get a hold of family that may or may not be within the United States. And the tour bus of international students from countries worldwide, speaking many languages other than English, and having perhaps limited access to the resources and the information that are within the Seattle area. It became a very complex incident very quickly. So it went from kind of day-to-day operations to vertical, oh wow. And from the picture, you can see they have triage areas set up with the different colored tarps and things. But this was absolutely a mass casualty incident. There ended up being 51 patients sent to 9 different hospitals throughout the city. And the agencies that responded to this did an incredibly great job in addressing the immediate life safety issues there on the scene. But as you can imagine, there was much more still to be done. After the response had finished, after those persons were extricated from those vehicles, they needed assistance, whether it was medical assistance, getting in contact with family, their consulates, and all this. And so that's where Google Maps was utilized. Very, very quickly, multiple agencies in the Seattle area collaborated and put together and shared this Google Map with the individuals that were being affected from and that were affected by this this horrific incident. And what they were able to do is by sharing this information with them, as well as agencies or accounts that these individuals may follow on social media, they were able to look at and point them and create this custom map with hospitals, pharmacies, grocery stores, areas for family reunification, and things of that nature, because you had many different, many families that were affected, networks and social networks that were disrupted, and to direct people to the services and the resources that they needed to bring this back together and to help them in their recovery process was absolutely vital. And there's any number of resources that you see listed there. But one thing to think about is that it's not just getting families back together, but also how do families get from point A to point B? Think about it. The bus, perhaps the tour bus that their student, their family member, their friend was on, just got crashed into. Maybe they're a little bit shy about taking public transportation. So remember that multimodal feature, Google Maps allows for the walking, the biking, and driving directions. And also perhaps people may not have access to all those modes of transportation. So right from within Google Maps, they can plug in and from their location on their phone, they can click on whichever icon they need or area they need to get to, and it can be routed there. And of course, translated automatically into the language they have set with their Google account. And they rolled this out in just a matter of minutes and updated it constantly as this event was unfolding, as they got more information, and collaborated with the hospital networks. Where are these people being sent, and what hospitals are being involved, so the family members could know which hospitals they needed to call, instead of trying to go through every one of the seemingly, I would imagine, hundreds of care facilities and aid facilities throughout the Seattle area. And so it was a really great deployment of Google Maps. And so all of the universities, from the students that were involved, as well as their networks as well, they were able to all share this information. And it was a kind of a sole source, a sole gathering point where all the agencies involved could collaborate and share information. And so then if you would click on any of those, say like Harborview or any of the medical centers, for example, in the description, there was the phone number and the address of that hospital or of that care facility, so people could call and get more information and kind of get referred to that official source. So a really neat case study here and how that was used. Another one is down in Rockport, Texas. Stand by one. In Rockport, Texas, there we are. So I'd like to take you all back to the evening of August 25th, 2017 on the Texas coast. As night falls, Hurricane Harvey makes landfall near Rockport, Texas as a Category 4 hurricane, with wind gusts measured at over 150 miles per hour. On the left there, you see the radar reflectivity image as Harvey made landfall near Rockport. On the right-hand side is a map of the actual hurricane track, as well as the reported wind gusts, or measured wind gusts, excuse me, as the storm impacted the Texas coast. Rockport was among the hardest hit, as they took a hit from both sides of Hurricane Harvey's eye wall, both as the first part moved inland, the eye moved over, and then the second part came around. And in total, they experienced sustained hurricane force winds, and that's 74 miles an hour or greater, for nearly 10 hours, on top of 15 to 20 inches of rain. As a result of this, many structures, residences, businesses in Rockport, they were observed to be damaged or destroyed. Roofs were blown off, walls were collapsed, electricity and water services were lost. The city's infrastructure was truly crippled, and there was almost no communications capability in Rockport. And any of you that have heard me present or talk on monitoring social media before with these types of situations, in the digital space, the silence in Rockport was deafening, right? And we always have to be cognizant and monitor and ask ourselves, this area just got rocked really hard. This area is being impacted very severely, or has been. Why are we not seeing that much activity, perhaps on social media, from the survivors, and starting to ask ourselves why that might be? In this case, it was because of the severe damage to the infrastructure. But now, as media attention focused largely on the catastrophic and historic flooding in Houston, residents in and near Rockport, they quickly began to realize that it was up to them to come together as a community and enable a successful response and to begin the recovery process. National and international disaster relief organizations focused their efforts on the Houston area initially. And so Rockport, they're both in Rockport and the communities surrounding them, said, we have to come together, we have to do something. And while you had donation centers that sprung up in any structure that was still standing, you often ended up with a situation like the photo on the right, where people would, they have the urge, people post-disaster, they have the urge to contribute. They want to donate something to the survivors. If they can't donate, and actually get up, be boots on the ground and help out, they want to donate stuff, because in their mind, survivors, they lost everything, so they must need everything and anything to help them recover as a family. So because these donation centers were so overwhelmed, people got tired of waiting or trying to find an open donation center. And if they saw the sign, like in the photo on the left, there was a drop-off donation center, they would pull up into the parking lot, dump the stuff right out of the back of their vehicle onto the concrete, sometimes in boxes and in bags, but most of the time not, and drive off. So you end up with situations where, if anyone here on the call has ever managed donations following an incident, you know that donations management is often referred to as the disaster after the disaster, and rightfully so. So if it became quickly a situation that was starting to spiral out of control, but a group known as, there were several groups that came down and contributed here. It was a really, really awesome response, and the Field Innovation Team, FIT, Field Innovation Team, was just one of the many groups. And what they did was truly remarkable. I know Alicia was down there, And these are photos from her deployment down there as well. Several other folks that came down from the Pacific Northwest as well. And what they sought to do was to bring order and structure to the seeming chaos of the situation. And so the Field Innovation Team is a group of volunteer disaster technologists from across the US, and they wanted to coordinate those donations. So they focused initially on community donation centers and helped network them together through both high-tech and low-tech methods. They started off by doing a windshield survey, and that's driving around looking for facilities, and they focused on places of worship, as those were often community hubs for information already. So they leveraged that, and after finding places of worship in and around Rockport that were still serviceable after the hurricane, they found of 42 centers, 10 were viable for distribution. And it's not just clothing that was available, but many other types of resources. But what each location was able to provide and what they had on site varied. And so what they did was they mapped out using Google Maps and created a point for each of those distribution centers. From there, if a user were to click on any of those points, they would be able to get contact information for a representative at that specific facility if they had any specific questions, as well as they were able to update in real time. They were able to update in real time what was going on with that particular donation center. And that was the high-tech method. But remember, the communications infrastructure was very slow to come back online in Rockport following Hurricane Harvey. So yes, there were very high-tech methods, but the low-tech methods was they actually created a flyer. They printed and they took a screenshot of the Google map, put a title and a legend on there as well. If any of you have done GIS or map making, you know I'm really loving this type of thing, right? They got a title, they have things that are labeled, they have a legend on there with the addresses of these places. And on the backside of that flyer, they had some other really important information for those disaster survivors. They were able to put a QR code on there, and this is actually still a live QR code if you wanted to scan that, or you can also type in the Google link there in the middle of this screen here. It's actually still active. You can see what they did and what they put together, and that map is still out there and available. So on the back of this flyer that was included, and in all of the handouts from these donation centers, they were able to share the information in both high-tech and low-tech ways. And of course, to assist the community with their disaster recovery efforts and assist the survivors, they included the SciStart mental health triage card on there as well. Because anyone who has gone through a very impactful stress incident in their life, they have any number of factors that can affect their mental health, and that's one aspect that is, unfortunately, it can be overlooked in the recovery phase. And so including this, personally as a EMT and someone who does a lot of work in that space, I thought this was absolutely incredible that they were able to put this together. And because psychological well-being and mental health and recovery from stress injuries is an incredible part of response in a post-disaster environment. So that's how the Field Innovation Team employed Google Maps in both the high-tech and low-tech method. And this actually was so popular that I think it was one of the Baptist churches actually took and started putting this in every single bag of donations, no matter how large or small, because they saw the value in it, and so that people could get the resources that they need. It started all the way from butcher paper and painter's tape and permanent markers to put these maps together in the Field Innovation Team Command Center. Google Maps was deployed, high-tech and low-tech methods, and here we go. So this is a little bit about how it's been used. But let's go ahead and get mapping. I'm going to switch over now to the live version, the hands-on demo. And to get yourself started, this does work best. You can do this. We found on like an iPad would really be ideal. That's got the biggest screen, so you can do this. But it works best on a laptop or a desktop using the Google Chrome browser. That's what we recommend to make this easier. So the steps that you need to get started: sign into Google, and that can be any of your, on the Google suite of products, that can be Maps, Google Drive, whatever. As long as you are signed into your Google account, so if you log in, say to google.com, if you go to the upper right-hand part of the screen, if there's the box that says sign in, you need to click on that, sign into your Google account. If it is, if I already see your name or your agency name up there, then you're already signed in and you're ready to go. Then what you'll need to do is navigate to google.com/my maps. So that's google.com/my maps, MYMAPS. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over here and demo this live. I'm going to need to switch my windows around here. Okay, we're going to make this full screen here for full effect for all of you out there in the Google Hangouts land. And so I've gone to mymaps.google.com, and you should see an interface similar to this. You'll see any maps that you've created before, or if you haven't created any, then this is where we're going to be. And any of these maps, when they're initially created, they are viewable only by you and you alone with your Google account. And you can choose to make these public or shareable, but that's by default, they are just for your agency. So just a disclaimer there that that is the initial permissions that are there for viewing that content. So what we're going to do and start with is go to create a new map. So click on that. As that comes through, we're going to see a kind of our blank slate, our canvas, if you will, and we can start to put some things together. But let me orient you a little bit to this interface. So in the upper left, this is kind of our guide box up here. So we have our map title. Right now it's an untitled map. First thing that I like to do when I create a map is to give it a title, not just because it's proper map making etiquette, but because I can sometimes get sidetracked on projects and I want to be able to know, hey, if I come back to this, what type of map was I creating? So for this example, and you can choose whichever one you would like, so please don't think you have to follow along exactly with my example, but follow along with perhaps my methodology instead. What I'm going to demo here today is plotting some parks in Aspen, Colorado, which is where I'm based out of. So I'm going to just name this Aspen, Colorado Parks. And that will be my map title. So I just click on Untitled Map. I'll type in Aspen, Colorado Parks. I can add a description, like perhaps a URL or an official link back to some sources of information. But for right now, I'm going to leave that blank. But if I wanted to add more context, I could. I'll go ahead and click Save on that. And now this map is named Aspen, Colorado Parks. Again, as I'm going along, please feel free to jump in with any questions that you might have. Just check here. Okay, quick message from Mickey. I'll just pause and say this here. Thanks, Mickey. Totally understand that you got to do the family time thing this morning. Totally understand that. So shout out to Mickey for keeping things going on the home front there. Mad props to you. And again, she'll be in contact with our team if she has any updates for us. So now that we have a title for our map, now we want to search for whatever we want to map. So in our search bar, this acts just like the Google search bar that we're used to. You can search whatever you'd like. If you're feeling, if you got that Friday feeling and you want to make a map of perhaps craft breweries, restaurants, whatever it might be, feel free to do that. For the purposes of our training today, my demonstration is going to be Aspen, Colorado Parks. So I'll just put that in, hit enter. Now you see it plots and it has all these little markers super zoomed in here over Aspen. So I need to zoom in as well. And I'm going to do that here. Just come over a little bit. I apologize if the rendering takes a little bit slow. I'll pause as we go along just to make sure that we're all staying on the same page here as things load up in the background for me. So here's my collection of points that Google Maps found when I searched for Aspen, Colorado parks, the same way it would plot all these different little green markers if you searched for breweries or restaurants or whichever it might be. Your search results appear in this box on the left-hand side. And as you mouse over each of them, they'll highlight and have a little circle around them so you can see which point is which on the screen on the right or on your map, your main map. And so with each of these points, these search results, they want to know, or you might want to say, hey, I want to now add these points or some of them to my map. And they're added in what's called a layer. So these layers, the first layer that's here, the untitled layer that you see just below your search results on the box on the left, that's where any points you select are going to go. And so to add those points to your layer, if you mouse over, let's say here, like Wagner Park, right? If you mouse over it, you'll see a dark gray plus sign over towards the right from the name that says Wagner Park. And if I click on that plus sign, I'll see Wagner Park. That symbol changes color, and it gets moved from my search results down to the layer. So I can do this, and I'll say I'll add a couple more parks. Say I'll do Pepke Park and Glory Hole Park. Yes, that's a thing here in Aspen. So I'll add those 3 parks to my search results, or to my layer, excuse me. And so now in this layer, I have those 3 points that I selected. If I wanted to add more, I could. But for right now, I can clear my search results by clicking this X up here. And now I have 3 different points: Wagner, Pepke, and Glory Hole Park. But for each of these, if I'm thinking about a park, blue little teardrop kind of symbols, really not what I think about when I think of a park. And if I'm making a map, I want to use the correct symbology. That is, would people visually recognize the symbol to show them, hey, this is in fact a park? And so you can start to add this symbology and the symbols that are used to represent these points. And you can do that either individually or you can do them together. By default, in this layer, Google has it selected and they say individual styles. Now, what that means is that I can individually customize and must individually customize the color and the symbol and the color of the symbol for each of these individually. Now, if I'm doing like multiples of these, so remember it's multiple hospitals, multiple parks, multiple craft breweries, something of that nature, I don't want to go through and customize each one. I could click on individual styles, and it asks me how I want to group the places. And I can change that by clicking on the little paint roller icon above my different points and change that and say, I want to do a uniform style. So if I say uniform style, that now kind of groups those all together, and one change affects all of those points in that layer. And for me, on this map, because it's not too crowded, the next thing you can look at is labels. And I like to have the name of the point next to where it's plotted on the map. If it gets a little bit too busy, you can turn that off. And as you can see, those populate there. And I know I'm in a bit of a widescreen format, so I'll zoom in here so we can see a little bit better what's going on here on the map for those of you viewing this recording. So now your next question is, all right, so we grouped these together and we're under uniform style for these. So it's one change affects all the points in that layer. And now to change the symbology or the symbol and the colors that are used for those points, if I mouse over like all items or that individual point, and I slide my cursor over to the right, I see a little paint bucket with a drop coming out of it. If I click on that paint bucket to the right of where it says all items on my screen, I'll then see, hey, there are all items in this layer. I can change the name of that, but I'm really focused on, I wanted a different symbol, something that would represent a park. So just to show you guys all the symbols that are here, I'm going to click on more icons. And this brings up this whole icon library. And this thing is absolutely huge. It's a monstrous library, so you can get really creative with this, both in personal and professional uses. And if any of you are using this for crisis response or things, Google groups these into different categories. So if I click on crisis, for example, this will show all the different symbols that it can be used in a crisis, right? So fire, hurricanes, different types of hurricanes, biological, biohazard, atomic, radiological, aliens, if that is the thing that you're planning for or responding to. Interesting. But just know that those are there and they're grouped by category so you can access those really, really quickly. But for me, I might want to search for something that is a symbol for a park or an outdoor facility. So in the filter box in the upper right-hand corner of the icon screen, I'll type in park. And so sports and recreation is the category, and I see a little tree. And hey, people see trees, they often think, yeah, it's probably a park. So I'll click on that, and now that'll change all my symbols to trees. If I click OK, well, those are blue trees. I don't think of blue trees, in circles as a park. I'm thinking generally it's green. So I can click and change the color, so a dark green here. And so after I click on that, I've changed my symbol to those trees, and now I have the green for the color that I've added in there as well. So that's changed all the items in that layer to those green trees. And that's an example of how that's done. But what if we wanted to add, say, a point that isn't on or isn't in the Google search results? It's a custom point or something in a remote area that isn't automatically in the Google database. Well, if I want to do that, and let's say I'm going to do that in a separate layer. So I can click Add Layer on the left-hand side in that box. It'll add a new layer, and you'll see that there's, on the left-hand side of the layer that's active, there's a dark blue bar. So if I'm in my new layer down below, it's a dark blue bar on the left-hand side there. If I click up on my previous layer, the dark blue bar is there. So that's basically what you're modifying, or if you're adding things, they'll go into the layer that's active. So make sure that you have the correct layer selected. So one thing you can do, adding a custom point, you have a new layer. I'm going to go and click on what's this little balloon. Add marker is where it is, and it's below the search bar where we searched for our things earlier. If I click on Add Marker, click on that, and now my cursor becomes a little crosshair. If I click on that, say in the, let's do right here in downtown, I'll click, and a little point pops up. And I can click anywhere on the map and do that, whether or not there's actually something there. And perhaps if I'm having an event, I can label that check-in. And that would be my custom point for check-in. I can say northeast corner of Wagner Park, which is in downtown. And so if I save that, now that custom point is there, check in, and if people click on it, and I have added some more information that it's in the northeast corner of that park. So both on the map, as well as folks that may know where that particular park is. So that's how to add a custom point. Another neat thing that you can do with Google Maps is you can add directions right in the map. And so when you do that, right below your search bar at the top, you can click Add Directions. It looks like an arrow kind of with a fork in the road. Click on Add Directions. And it's going to create a new layer, and it's going to ask you, and it's going to ask first, what transportation mode are you using or creating these directions for? For me, if I'm doing this, it can be driving directions if it's between points that are, say, a little bit further apart, or that are perhaps in an area where there's a road network. If it's a little bit more rural, perhaps, then we might have to do the walk mode. But because it's Aspen and we're bike friendly, I'm going to click on cycling. So that's going to be my mode of transportation. And my first point, so point A, I'll have as check-in. So even if I started typing that, you'll see that it knows that your custom symbols even that you added. So I can say check-in, and I want to put that down to, let's say, Glory Hole Park. I see that symbol from my custom point that I added. And so there it'll zoom in and say, okay, based on what Google Maps knows, this is the safest cycling route from point A to point B. But I might know a little bit more. I might not want people going straight across, say, here on Cooper Avenue. Just like with Google Maps and creating your own routes, you can drag and adjust this route along the way. And so for me, for example, I may want to adjust this route and bring people down on Durant Avenue, in this case, and I want to avoid Cooper. I can take and I can drag that point down, and now that's a predefined route that's in my Google map. And so people are wondering, hey, how do I get from point A to point B? Perhaps I have an event that's letting out, or hey, if you're at this gate exiting this pre-planned event, this is the route that you're going to take out of the venue to get back to the main interstate or highway, whichever it might be. You can create these custom ones right in your custom Google map that you're putting together. And then finally, one of the things to check out, and one of the really neat ways that you can share information and get a point across in Google Maps is if you wanted to add a custom, like a polygon or like an area that you wanted to highlight. For example, if it's a evacuation area, if it's a area that is in a boil water notice, or perhaps you're plotting the boundaries on some type of fire or something of that nature, right? If you go up below your search bar in the top part, I'll go back and I'll add another layer here just for clarity on this map. And I go up above, or excuse me, just below my search bar, you'll see a couple of like points with lines, and it says draw a line if you mouse over that. So if I click on draw a line, I'll say I want to add a line or a shape. If I click on that, I have a crosshairs again, and I can now start clicking at any point on the map. I can add as many points or kind of boundaries that I want, so I can make it a very complex figure, or I can even just make it a square or a triangle. And then once I connect back and click back on my first point, that will then close the shape. So for example, if I wanted to highlight, say from here over and come up and come in and skip maybe just one block and have this little 3-block area, I'll click back on my original point. It now defines that as a polygon. And this might be if I have an activity going on, perhaps something in my area or an exercise, and I can say that that is out of play. For example, that's an area of a complex or whichever that might be out of play for an activity or an exercise, let's say, and I save that. It then also tells me the acreage and how many square miles that I just selected, if you're really curious about that. But then that's also added as a layer. And just like with any other things in your map, you can customize the color of it if you'd like, and kind of change how you want it displayed. So different ways to communicate information and draw that very quickly in your map. And one of the things as well, if you have predefined layers, like, so let's say if I want to add another layer, and just to show you this, if you already have GIS data, such as if I add another layer and I go to import, I can bring in CSV files, Excel files, KMLs, GPX files, right? I can drag and drop those right into Google Maps and it'll plot those up. So if you have these pre-existing layers from your county GIS department, a city GIS department, whatever it is, you can integrate and you can drag and drop those and it will populate and plot that right in your Google map on top of everything else that you would choose to select. And if you're adding things and perhaps these different layers get a little bit muddied up, if you will, you say, oh no, I wanted to group these things a little bit differently. You can drag and drop, like the point check-in. I might want to bring that down to a different layer. You can drag and drop points, polygons, and all that between all these different layers. And you can also, if you uncheck the boxes, that will disable that content being displayed in the map. So you can turn layers on and off as they become appropriate. So perhaps you have an exercise that you're doing and you want to add information kind of sequentially and not give it all away at first, right? Any of my training and exercise folks out there, you can check the box and add these things in piece by piece. Finally, the collaborative session on this, right? The collaborative piece, because that's what we mentioned is one of the huge advantages of Google Maps. So if I click on the share icon beneath my map title in the box on the left-hand side and I click share, you see the same interface as if you were sharing any type of Google thing, a doc, a sheet, a presentation, whatever it is. And now you can go in here, you can copy and paste, say, that link. You can also share it via email, Facebook, Twitter, any number of social media outlets. And you can invite people to collaborate and be editors on that and just put in names or email addresses and invite them. Then you can also do that down here as well. So all types of ways that you can share that information. You can say anyone with the link can view it. And then that's the public version of the map that people can view. They can't modify it, but they can see everything that you're doing. So that's a little bit about Google Maps and the hands-on portion of it. And that's all I have for you all today in training. For the hands-on, feel free to connect with myself or Hannah going forward using the information that we had there at the beginning. I'll put our contact information up here for you all to see as well. But that's what I have for you all today. So thank you so much for joining us, my friends from the Cascadia VOST, as well as my co-VOST teammates. It's been a true pleasure working with you all and sharing with you all today. If you got any questions, I'll hang around for a little bit on the conference call as well as in the YouTube chat interface, or feel free to connect with me on Twitter or via email using the information there. But again, thank you all so much for joining us. Thanks to Hannah, Alicia, and Eli for helping to build this content. And we'll see all my co-VOST friends in July for our July training. Cascadia VOST friends, thank you so much for joining us today and look forward to working with you all again soon. All right, if there's no questions, if anyone wants to unmute themselves, they're free to do that. But if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend. Take care, guys.